Okay, so let me quickly recap what we did as part of the illustration process. We understood the core techniques, how to figure out the base requirements from by reading some documents, and then how to prepare for the interviews, right? And how to use the observation technique for understanding the requirements in a little more detail. We also learned how to create those, use the prototyping for creating the markups and getting the requirements validated by the customer. We learned some of those group techniques like focus group and brainstorming session, and and let's focus on the rest of the techniques now. Okay, now let me. So we still have to cover these 4 different techniques to understand the requirements. So let's do that in today's session. I'll use a whiteboard for this. Now, in some cases, what you would have is you would have an existing way or an existing system in place, right? Now, this could be some old version or some bespoke system, right? So it's not the full-fledged system which is offered. So it's more like a stopgap solution which is there in place, and which is meeting their requirement, but they are not fully satisfied with that current system, right? So obviously they want to move to a better way of doing things, right? And this project would be about moving from this current state, or we also call it as is state, right? So there are multiple nomenclature we use. Some companies use as is state, some say current state, right? Some companies say point of departure, right? So POD, right? So they use these all terminologies and jargon, but basically what it means is this is how we are working currently, right? And we aspire to make it better, and then we want to arrive at a state which is called as a point of arrival, right? So this is the point of departure, this is the point of arrival, or we also call it as a future state of how the future system should look like, or the to be state, right? So again, these terms are used together in pairs, right? You're using a POD, it will be a POA for the new system. Its current state, then it would be future state. As is, it will be to be state, right? So that's the terminology which is used. So what it means is basically there is a way in which you are working currently, right? And this is the way the system currently works, right? And there are some issues with this system which you want to resolve and make it better, and which is your to be state, right? Now this overall process is called as a business process reengineering. Okay, so they'll figure out what we can improve at each of these set process, right? So there are some set of activities that you would do, right? So they'll figure out all those activities and then see if they can modify it to work more efficiently, and then arrive it to the to be state. So this overall process is one type of projects, right? Existing system is there and you want to replace it with a future or a new system. Okay, so this would be the context where you tend to use a reverse engineering, right? So reverse engineering is used to understand this system. Okay, so you already have this system. So rather than start the requirements from scratch here, you could actually look at that system and see what all functionality it is offering, and then what are the the pain points or bottlenecks that it has, right? So which are stopping you from working efficiently, right? And you will try to resolve those issues, right, by addressing it in the to be state, right? So all those, you'll understand the current process, you'll understand the the bottlenecks and the issues, the pain points in the current system, and then you would redefine the new process so such that it addresses all those issues, right? So this overall exercise is generally called as business process engineering, We also would call the process of understanding the requirements from an existing system as reverse engineering, right? So, see, the name again, reverse engineering, is because a typical engineering would have your requirements, and then that translates into your final system, right? But here, what we are doing is there is a system in place, and from the system we are deriving the requirements, right? So, it's it's the reverse process of re-engineering, so hence the name reverse engineering, right? So reverse engineering is a technique wherein you would look at the current system. So you will use it functionally and then try to figure out what it is doing, and then you would redesign it to make it efficient, or you will capture your requirements in a way it is more effective, right? One good example, if you look at all these mainframe systems, right? Now they have all these the green screen kind of right. So earlier systems, when at the in start of the older systems, used to look like this, right? So they used to have all those options just displayed on the screen. We also used to call them as the green screen systems, right? So there is no mouse, there is no user interface. All you could do is you could just enter the values using your keyboard, and it used to work, right? Now it used to meet the functionality, right? So you're still getting that functionality out, but it's a little ineffective or inefficient way of doing things, right? Now if you have the user interface with the GUI and let's say on the Java right, so something like that. You have all those user interface new screens which you could use, right? Or even further, all your right? You could end up with a screen something like this, or much more efficient way of doing things, right? So rather than type everything, you could just use your mouse, or maybe a lot of it is done being the touch screens as well. So you can do it in a different way, right? So that is exactly what we are trying to do as part of the reverse engineering. So the current of system, we are understanding the requirement, looking at those green screen systems, the mainframe systems, understand the functionality, and then we are redesigning it to develop that using newer technologies, right? So that's the context where you could use reverse engineering. So you don't need to always go to the customer and ask, okay, tell me the requirement. Right? If there is an existing system, you use that system and then understand half of the requirements. Right? So maybe you can have a follow-up session to understand the intricacies and the final details, but the base details you could understand using the reverse engineering technique, right? So maybe you'll do a document analysis, and then before going interviews, maybe you'll do a reverse engineering session, right? So you'll basically ask for access to the system, and then start using it to understand how it currently works. And then you'll also figure out on you'll focus on the main pain points or bottlenecks with the current process, right? And try to address it when you're creating or designing the new system, right? So that's basically is your reverse engineering technique. Okay, so rather than completely depending on the SME to tell you the requirements as part of the interview process, you could gain some of the understanding by doing the reverse engineering technique. Then we need to talk about workshops, right? Now, usually you tend to conduct some workshops where there are multiple teams. Some systems could be used by multiple departments, multiple teams, right? Multiple business units, right? And they perform their work. Like there could be a logistics team which is delivering. There could be an accounts team which is taking care of the payments, and then there could be a product team which is or a supply chain team which is bringing in new products, right? So all these requirements could be managed by one single team, one single system. Okay. Now this system should cater to needs of all these various teams. If you go and meet them individually, they will have their own version of requirement, and there would be differences between their versions as well, right? So one person would think half of the work should be done by the other team, and the other team would have a different version, right? So those differences would come in as part of the as part of the understanding of the requirements. The customers themselves would conflict with one another. That this is the requirement. Another person says no, this is not. You have to do it in a different way, right? In those kind of situations, it's difficult to go for and have those one-on-one discussions. It's difficult to have those interviews because even if you have them, they will have a different version. So obviously, you will get into those back and forth discussions and then say, the other person has a different view of the requirement. So it's difficult to get that consensus. Okay, it's difficult to get an agreement onto the requirements. So what do? You can conduct a joint meeting and then say, you'll call all the different participants, all the representation from all the different teams, and then say, these are the requirements which we need to finalize. And usually the workshops could differ, could extend from a couple of hours, some half-day sessions to some 1 week or 2 week sessions also, right? So where you dedicatedly sit on it and then finalize onto all your requirements. So you will work as a moderator. You will say that this is the requirement, right? And let's figure out between all the teams, what is the best way of doing things, right? So you're using it as a group discussion, and then let all those the various business units and their representatives discuss and then finalize onto the requirement, right? So there would be differences. They would discuss about it. They would find the pros and cons of each way of doing things, right? So they would redefine it and finally agree on to one way in which the system should work, right? So it will effectively save you a lot of time because you are not talking to them individually, and since it's a joint discussion, everybody can close out their differences right in that workshop. Okay, that's the main reason why you use workshops. Okay, so wherever you think that there are multiple teams involved, and we need to sit together and then figure out, agree to a common understanding about the requirement, right? So conduct workshops. Okay, now for normal requirement where there is only one team and then there is one business analyst, one SME who's telling you the requirements, a workshop might not be relevant, right? So you can just have that one-on-one discussion and understand the requirement. So generally workshops are used as a way to gain consensus about the requirements, right? So it's a focus group meeting. It's a meeting with a specific agenda. Clearly, these are some of the requirements that we need to discuss. You will agree on to that. You'll discuss it, and finalize onto the requirement, right? So broadly, if you look at the focus groups and requirements workshop, they're mostly a group meeting, right? So you don't even need to use these terminologies. So the client might not even understand when you say a focus group meeting or maybe a workshop or a reverse engineering technique. A lot of times the client is unaware of all these illustration methods, right? So don't use the jargon. Forget about the jargon and then try to use the technique and then say, let's have this meeting to finalize the requirements, right? So that's something but as a workshop, right? So focus groups, you could send out a meeting invite saying that discuss all these options about a particular requirement, right? And again, so you could clearly list down the agenda and then say, this is what we intend to do in this meeting, right? So all of them would generally be a group meeting, right? But the agenda and the way you would conduct the meeting, like for a focus group or a brainstorm or a workshop, would be a little different, right? So you need to be aware of all those techniques, but don't confuse or scare the customer with all these techniques, the jargons and the names and all, right? So it's only for you to internalize and then understand that these are the ways in which I could understand the requirements, and wherever relevant, use them, right? So some cases, workshops could be relevant. Some cases, reverse engineering sessions could be relevant, right? So use them judiciously wherever you think it makes sense to use those techniques. So the overall the key message what I want to say is that use these techniques to based on the context and to understand the requirements. Don't scare the customer with all these terminologies, and don't expect the customer to know all these techniques. Okay, so yeah, so we discussed about reverse engineering and workshops.
Thanks for watching the video. Please like, comment and subscribe for more updates.